What's up, guys? It's Sports RT. It's Dave and Sam. You know us, and we're going to do our Week 5 look back recap of the games that happened. A lot happened. There's some upsets, there's some blowouts, and let's get right into it.
Yep. So Alabama number one, Georgia number two, both going in some big matchups. Georgia playing number eight Arkansas, Bama playing number 12 Ole Miss, and they both blew them out of the water.
Yeah, wasn't even close. Georgia, Alabama are easily the best two teams. Doesn't matter what order you put them in. They're the best two teams in the country. You're not going to be able to compete with them. They're just competing with themselves. And I mean, you take a good Arkansas team that's coming up. They're being very hot, and they're working their way up the rankings. And then Georgia shuts them out. 37-0. Alabama doing what they always do, kicking butt. And I mean, they killed that Ole Miss team.
Yeah. And, I really feel like it's Alabama and Georgia versus the rest of the world. There's at this point, I do not see a team that could compete with Alabama or Georgia. And I've got a big feeling this could be the SEC championship game and could be a big major playoff game, depending on how the SEC championship goes. The dogs, and it was unbelievable how you think JT Daniels is out for the dogs. And if I didn't watch the game and someone told me, oh, by the way, they had their backup quarterback in, he went 7 for 11, I would think to myself, Georgia's offense struggled. Then I look at the score. Georgia won 37-0. They ran the ball every single play. And Arkansas had nothing.
Yeah. Arkansas could not stop the run. And it was the same with Ole Miss. Ole Miss could not stop Bama's run, and that's why they are so dominant. Is because they can run the football when they want, and they can throw the football with it when they want, and that's why they're ahead of the pack.
Yeah. Bama. The run set up their RPO for them, and Ole Miss just had nothing. No, like any resistance for Alabama's offense, for them. And those are the two blowouts. We had some upsets though this weekend. Stanford, Oregon. A lot of people thought maybe Oregon could sleepwalk through this one. In Stanford upsetting Oregon 31-24.
Yep. The pass game for Oregon did not go anywhere. No passing TDs. Oregon's quarterback threw an interception. It just wasn't looking very good for them, and throughout the whole game, Stanford on the other hand came out firing. They were ready to play. 3 touchdowns through the air, and they just dominated.
Yes, they did, and it came down to the end, and Stanford just got the better of them. They played more physical, and it's close the whole game, and a lot. Oregon, being number 3 in the country, working their way up from number 12 to number 3 after getting a high quality win against Ohio State. People thought this should be a walk in the park for them against an unranked Stanford, but Stanford said no, we can beat you.
Yeah, Stanford. If you go look at the stats, Stanford did not look like they were the better team, and they were the team that won the game. They had almost, I think it's 60 less yards than them than Oregon did. It was big, and then they came out and they got the win with the OT upset. That's just something you like to see in everyday college football.
Yeah, it was a great game. And kudos to Stanford for getting the dub there. Kentucky, Florida. Kentucky had not won a game against Florida at home in 35 years. And they got the win 20-15.
Yeah, Kentucky just dominated pretty much the entire game. Emory Jones really couldn't get anything going with his legs or with throughout the air, but both quarterbacks struggled throwing the football. Both threw an interception. Kentucky's was a lot more costly because it put Florida right next to the end zone, but Kentucky is figuring out ways to win the game. They had a blocked field goal that they returned for a touchdown. They went up 14-10, and then
Never looked back.
they went up, or yeah, it was like 20-10 or something like that, and that's when the game was gone.
Yeah, the play of the game was definitely that blocked field goal for a TD. And Kentucky just looked better. They played more physical than Florida, and they wanted it. And all the fans stormed the field after. It was a great sight to see after Kentucky got that historic win against Florida that a lot of people thought wouldn't happen this year.
Yeah, Kentucky is figuring out ways to win football games. They're 5-0, and they're looking very good right now. Florida, on the other hand, 3-2. I mean, they've played an Alabama team. It's very good.
Yeah,
We already talked about them, and they got a close loss. But then this game, you just can't happen. If you even want to compete to go to Atlanta with Georgia, you have to win these games. And
yeah. Now this
I've
was
been saying this that Kentucky figures out ways to win ball games, and that's why they're 5-0 right now. That's why they're beating teams like Florida, Missouri, and I ultimately think they have the second best shot in the SEC East to get to Atlanta.
Yeah, because Florida is 2 games behind Georgia. Florida and Georgia do meet in a few weeks from now, 3 or 4, something like that. Our other upset, Mississippi State taking out 15th ranked Texas A&M.
Yeah, for Texas A&M, this was a game that they struggled very much in. They could not run the football very well or throw the football as well as they would like to. I mean, when you're a Texas A&M team that has just lost to Arkansas, and you're dropping in leaderboards, you have Alabama coming up very soon. Or it's next, and you're saying, okay, we got to win this game so we can get back on the right path for Alabama. And Mississippi State said, no, not today. We're gonna beat you. And Polk, the Mississippi State receiver, had a great game. Will Rogers, though, I think this is his 3rd or 4th game for throwing over 400 yards in the game with 3 TDs. They had 59 attempts throwing the football. 48 of them were completed, and that's something that Mike Leach wants. And now you're really seeing his air attack work very well with him.
Mm-hmm. That was a must-win for Texas A&M coming off the loss against Arkansas. And really it was Alabama, and then after Arkansas, winning a lot. It was Alabama, Arkansas, Texas A&M. With who would compete with Alabama. Now it's looking like Alabama really has no competition left there in the SEC West. So another top 10 matchup, wasn't really a close game. Cincinnati taking down Notre Dame in South Bend, and Cincinnati just looked like they wanted it more. Desmond Ridder played really well, and Cincinnati, I mean, they are looking really good. I'm not saying anything. They have a shot though at maybe making the playoffs, which would be historic.
Yeah, that would be the first Group 5 team to make the playoffs. And first quarter, you look at it, 0-0. Well, okay, it's going to be a pretty tight game. Who's going to stake it out? Second quarter, Cincinnati scores 17 points. Going into halftime, if you're Notre Dame, you're like, oh, crap. Cincinnati's up 17. We've played 2 quarters, and we haven't scored a touchdown yet. Third quarter, Notre Dame shut them out, which was good. They needed that, but they only could put up 7 on the board. They needed more. And that's why the Notre Dame team, I don't think, should be ranked as high as they were. They barely snuck out a win against Florida State, and then they only put up 7 points in the first 3 quarters against a top 10 team. That is not what you cannot do that. You have to put up more points than 7 in 3 quarters.
Yeah, and Cincinnati could really make history with the run they have. This was Cincinnati's game that they had to win. This is the only, if you look at their schedule, this is the only big game they actually have on their schedule that could potentially like get them in is this key game. And so they had to win this. So now all they had to do for the rest of the season is just blow out all these terrible teams you've never heard of. And if they do that, they have a really good shot of making the playoffs with all this drama happening in the top 10.
Yeah, this is the shot that Cincinnati has of winning this or getting into the playoffs because they have one win against Notre Dame. Good. No one else on their schedule is good. Maybe you could say maybe BYU, maybe all these other schools, but not really.
Mhm.
And this was a key win for them that they can go in and say, hey, we beat Notre Dame. We should be in the playoffs. But especially next week, it's going to be the rankings are going to be shifting up next week.
Yeah, great win there for Cincinnati. All right, so our fun fact of the day. So a couple weeks ago, Penn State had a whiteout game, and the crowd got up to 105 decibels, which is extremely loud. It's decibels is just a way to kind of measure loudness. Well, this weekend during the Georgia game, the Georgia fans were able to get up to 110 and surpass the Penn State whiteout, which I thought was pretty cool because I thought the Penn State whiteout would be the loudest in college football. And surprisingly, the Georgia fans came out and were rocking that stadium. All right, so moving on to our rankings. Me and David are going to give you our top 5 rankings, starting off with David.
Okay, number 1, Alabama. They're looking too good. I mean, they're just dominating. As we said, they're dominating, and no one's going to be able to compete with them that much except for Georgia. And that's why I have Georgia at number 2. Now, my number 3 is I'm going to put Iowa, just because they came out and they led Talia Tagovailoa, and they made him throw 5 interceptions in one game. That is awful. And that's the defense they have. They beat them pretty bad. 4 is going to be Penn State. Going to put Penn State there at 4. They're just a great team they shut out Indiana 24-0. They weren't scoring all these big numbers every quarter. They averaged like 7 points a quarter, something like that, or 6 points a quarter. But they're a good team and they fight really hard. And you have to score more than 35 points to beat Penn State because Penn State is going to score 38 or 28 on a consistent basis. Number 5, I'm going to go Cincinnati. And the reason is because, yes, they beat Notre Dame, but Oklahoma is not the team that I'm going to put in at number 5. They're not good enough. They're not going to be able to handle with anyone. They beat Kansas State by 4 points. They beat Tulane by 5. They beat West Virginia by, 3 or 7, something like that. And these are unranked teams that can happen. And as a number 6 ranked team in the country, you should be beating these teams by 20. And that's not happening. So that's why Cincinnati for me is at number 5.
Yep. So right now, my top 5 is looking very similar to that. Alabama number 1, Georgia number 2, obviously, the 2 best teams in the country. Number 3, I got Iowa, and number 4, I got Penn State. I feel like those are kind of just placeholders for them because one of them is going to drop out when they play each other in the coming weekends. And then at number 5, Cincinnati, after the big win against Notre Dame. I feel like that's Cincinnati is going to be looking in after the Iowa Penn State game. They'll either be number 5 or number 4, depending on Oklahoma's placing in the rankings. All right, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of College Football Recap. Subscribe to the Sports OT. See you guys later.
See ya.